The afternoon sun filtered through the Venetian blinds of the cozy Atlanta studio, casting gentle shadows across Lucille O'Neill's weathered hands as she adjusted the microphone. At 70, her posture remained proud, her voice steady, but there was something different about today. After decades of watching her son Shaquille dominate basketball courts and television screens, she had finally agreed to tell her story, the real story. "I've been quiet for so long," Lucille began, her Louisiana accent still evident despite decades away from her hometown. "People see Shaq now, all his success, his humor, his businesses, but they don't know what it took to get here. They don't know about the nights I went to bed hungry so he could eat." The interviewer, Sarah Chen, leaned forward with genuine interest. She had interviewed countless celebrities, but there was something raw and authentic about this moment that made her forget about ratings and focus on the human story unfolding before her. Lucille's eyes drifted to a framed photo on the nearby table. A young Shaquille at age 12, towering over his teammates, his arm wrapped around her petite frame. She was barely 5'2", and even then, he was already approaching 6 feet. "Raising a child alone is never easy," she continued, her voice catching slightly. "But raising Shaquille, that boy was special from the beginning, and I knew it. He was gentle as a lamb, but big as a house. Other kids were afraid of him. Teachers didn't know what to do with him, and I was just trying to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads." The studio fell silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Even the camera crew, veterans of countless interviews, found themselves captivated by the quiet strength emanating from this small woman who had raised one of the most recognizable figures in sports history. Lucille's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. People think because he became successful, it was all easy. But there were times, she paused, collecting herself. There were times I didn't know if we'd make it to the next month. Moving from Louisiana to Texas to Germany with the military, then to San Antonio. Each move was a new challenge, a new school for Shaq. New kids who stared at him like he was some kind of circus act. She smiled sadly, remembering those early days. He never complained, not once, even when he came home with torn clothes because some older boys tried to pick on him, thinking his size meant he was older. Even when we had to eat cereal for dinner because that's all we had, he'd just hug me and say, "It's okay, Mama, we got each other." The interviewer glanced at her notes, but realized that no prepared questions could capture the depth of what she was witnessing. This wasn't just an interview about a famous athlete's childhood. This was a testament to the power of a mother's love and determination. "The hardest part," Lucille continued, her voice growing stronger, "wasn't the money, though that was tough. It wasn't even the moving around. It was watching my boy try to figure out where he fit in this world. He was too big for his age, too gentle for some people's expectations, too smart for others to understand. I had to be his protector, his cheerleader, his disciplinarian, and his best friend all at once." Outside the studio, Atlanta's traffic hummed in the distance, but inside, time seemed suspended as Lucille O'Neill prepared to share the chapters of her life that had remained private for so long. The weight of truth was heavy, but she was ready to carry it into the light. The memory came flooding back as if it were yesterday. San Antonio, 1986. Lucille closed her eyes and let herself return to that cramped two-bedroom apartment where the air conditioner barely worked, and the walls were thin enough to hear every argument from the neighbors next door. "Shaq was 14 then," she said, her voice taking on a distant quality. "Growing so fast I could barely keep him in clothes that fit. Do you know what it's like to shop for a 14-year-old who wears size 17 shoes? Those shoes cost more than my weekly grocery budget, but I'd find a way. I'd work double shifts at the hospital, pick up extra hours wherever I could." Lucille had worked as a nurse's aide, a job that required physical strength she sometimes wasn't sure she possessed, especially after working 16-hour days. But every aching muscle and every exhausted moment was worth it when she saw Shaquille's face light up with new sneakers, or when she managed to keep him in the basketball league despite the fees. "There was this one night," she continued, her hands now steady as she found her rhythm in the storytelling. I remember it so clearly because it was one of those moments that define you as a parent. Shaq had made the school basketball team, and they needed money for new uniforms. $50. Doesn't sound like much now, but then, that was groceries for a week. The studio lights seemed to dim as Lucille transported everyone listening to that difficult evening. She had counted and recounted the bills, checked the couch cushions for loose change, even considered pawning her mother's wedding ring, the only valuable thing she owned. I was sitting at the kitchen table with all our bills spread out, trying to make the math work, when Shaq came out of his room. He was so tall he had to duck under the doorframe we never got around to raising. He took one look at me and those papers, and I saw something change in his face. She paused, remembering the mixture of determination and sadness in her young son's eyes. He said, "Mama, I don't need to play basketball. I can get a job, help out more around here." And I broke down. Here was this giant of a boy, still a child really, ready to give up his dreams because he saw his mother struggling. That's when I knew I had to be stronger than I'd ever been before. The interviewer could see tears forming in Lucille's eyes, but her voice remained steady. I told him, "Baby, you're going to play basketball. Not because it might make us money someday, but because it makes you happy. Because it's where you belong." Then I went to my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, and I asked to borrow the money. I'd never asked anyone for help before. Pride, you know? But watching my son offer to sacrifice his happiness for me, that was my breaking point. Lucille smiled through her tears. Mrs. Rodriguez didn't just lend me the $50. She gave me 100 and said, "That boy is special, mija. Don't you ever let the world make him feel small." I paid her back every penny, but I never forgot that kindness. What I didn't tell Shaq until years later, Lucille continued, was that I went without eating lunch for 3 weeks to make sure we had that money for his next tournament fee. I'd pack him a good lunch every morning, tell him I'd eaten already, then spend my lunch break at the hospital taking naps in the break room because I was too weak from hunger. The camera captured the raw emotion on her face as she relived those sacrificial moments. But you know what kept me going? Every evening when he came home from practice, his face would be glowing. He'd tell me about the plays they ran, the improvements he was making, how his coach said he had real potential. That light in his eyes, that was worth every empty stomach, every double shift, every sleepless night worrying about money. As Chapter 2 drew to a close, Lucille looked directly into the camera, speaking not just to the interviewer, but to every parent who had ever made impossible choices for their children's dreams. People think sacrifice has to be dramatic to matter, but sometimes it's as simple as going hungry so your child can chase their dreams. Sometimes love looks like pretending you're not tired when you're exhausted, pretending you're not scared when you're terrified, and pretending you have it all figured out when you're making it up as you go along. The atmosphere in the studio shifted as Lucille's story moved toward the pivotal moments that would change everything. She reached for the glass of water again, not because she was thirsty, but because she needed a moment to gather the emotional strength for what came next. 1989, she said, the year hanging in the air like a milestone marker. Shaq was 17, and scouts were starting to come around. I remember thinking, this can't be real. People want to pay my baby to play the game he loves? But with opportunity came new pressures, new decisions I wasn't prepared to make. The camera zoomed in slightly as Lucille's expression grew more serious. She was approaching the part of her story that she'd kept private for over 3 decades. One evening, I was working late at the hospital when I got a call from Shaq's school. He'd been in a fight, something that never happened because he was such a gentle soul. When I got there, I found him sitting in the principal's office with his knuckles scraped and his jersey torn. The other boy was fine, barely a scratch on him. Lucille's voice took on a protective edge as she continued. Turns out, some kids had been saying things about me, about how I was just using Shaq for money, how I was a single mother who couldn't control her son, how we didn't belong in their neighborhood. They pushed him until something in my gentle giant finally snapped. She shook her head, still feeling the mixture of pride and concern from that day. The principal wanted to suspend him, which would have meant missing the regional championship. College scouts were coming to that game. Everything we'd worked for, everything we'd sacrificed, could have ended right there. The studio was completely silent as everyone waited to hear how this crucial moment unfolded. I asked to speak to those boys who had been bullying Shaq. I wanted to understand what kind of children would attack a boy for his family's circumstances. When I sat down with them and their parents, I realized something important. They weren't really angry at Shaq. They were scared of him. Scared of his size, scared of his talent, scared that he represented something they couldn't compete with. Lucille's wisdom and grace in handling that situation became clear as she continued. I told them about our journey, about the moves, the sacrifices, the nights we went without, so Shaq could pursue his dreams. I explained that success wasn't something that happened to us. It was something we were building together, one day at a time, one challenge at a time. By the end of that meeting, those boys were crying, not because they were in trouble, but because they finally understood that the big kid they'd been tormenting was just like them, trying to find his place in the world, trying to make his family proud. The interviewer leaned forward, clearly moved by the story. What happened next? The principal decided not to suspend Shaq. Instead, he arranged for those boys to attend the championship game together. They became some of his biggest supporters that night, cheering louder than anyone when he scored 35 points and secured his team's victory. More importantly, they became friends. Real friends. Lucille's eyes sparkled with the memory. After the game, when all those college coaches were surrounding us with offers and promises, I pulled Shaq aside. I told him, "Baby, all these people want something from you now. But remember who you are. Remember where you came from. Remember that your strength isn't just in your body. It's in your heart." She paused, the weight of that moment still evident in her voice. That night, LSU offered him a full scholarship. When we got home, Shaq sat me down at that same kitchen table where I used to count bills and worry about making ends meet. He took my hands in his enormous ones and said, "Mama, we did it. We really did it." But you know what made me proudest that night? It wasn't the scholarship or the attention from the media. It was when he asked me, "What do you want to do now, Mama? What are your dreams?" At 17 years old, after achieving something most kids only dream about, his first thought was about my happiness. Lucille wiped away a tear that had escaped despite her composure. That's when I knew I had raised not just a talented athlete, but a good man. All those years of sacrifice, all those nights of worry, all those moments when I wondered if I was doing enough, they led to this moment when my son was thinking about giving back to me. As the chapter drew to a close, Lucille looked directly into the camera again. The turning point wasn't the scholarship or the recognition. It was realizing that the values we'd held on to during the hardest times, gratitude, humility, love for family, those were the things that would carry us through whatever came next. The studio felt charged with emotion, as everyone present realized they were witnessing something special. A mother's reflection on the moment she knew her sacrifices had not only built her son's future, but had shaped his character in ways that money and fame never could. 3 days after Lucille's interview aired, something unexpected happened that no one could have predicted. Shaquille O'Neal, the larger-than-life personality known for his humor and business acumen, posted a video response that would become one of the most viewed and shared pieces of content in social media history. The video began simply. Shaq sitting in his home office, surrounded by his numerous awards and accolades, but his usual jovial demeanor replaced by something much more vulnerable and genuine. "I watched my mama's interview," he began, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "And I gotta be honest with y'all, I cried. I cried like I haven't cried since I was that little boy she was talking about." The camera captured every emotion crossing his face as he continued. "See, I knew we struggled when I was growing up. I knew Mama was working hard to take care of me. But what I didn't know, what she never let me see, was just how much she gave up for me." Shaq paused, gathering his thoughts with the same careful consideration his mother had shown during her interview. She talked about going hungry so I could eat. Y'all, I never knew that. She packed my lunch every single day, made sure I had everything I needed, and I never once saw her struggle with hunger. That's not just love. That's sacrifice on a level I'm still trying to understand. The video showed Shaq looking at childhood photos scattered across his desk, images of him and his mother at various stages of their journey together. His massive hands handled each photo with tender care. When she talked about borrowing money for my basketball uniform, I remembered that day differently. I remembered feeling bad about asking for things we couldn't afford, but I also remembered her smile when she told me everything was taken care of. What I didn't see was her swallowing her pride to ask for help. What I didn't see was her working extra shifts to pay it back. The emotion in his voice became more apparent as he continued. My mama taught me that being big doesn't just mean being physically large. It means having a big heart, big dreams, and big responsibilities to the people who love you. She showed me what real strength looks like. It looks like a 5'2" woman taking on the world for her child. Shaq stood up and walked to a window, looking out at the expansive grounds of his estate. Everything I have, everything I've accomplished, every business deal, every championship, every moment of success, it all started with a woman who believed in me when I was just a awkward giant of a kid who didn't know where he fit in the world. He turned back to the camera, and viewers could see tears in his eyes. Mama, if you're watching this, and I know you are because you watch everything I do, I need you to know something. You asked me once what my dreams were, and I told you about basketball and business and all these big plans, but I never told you my biggest dream. The pause that followed was filled with anticipation from the millions watching. My biggest dream was to become successful enough to give you everything you gave up for me, to make sure you never have to worry about money again, never have to work double shifts, never have to choose between your needs and mine. That dream came true a long time ago, but I never properly thanked you for making it possible. Shaq walked over to his desk and picked up a set of keys. These are the keys to your new house, the one we've been talking about building. But more than that, these represent my promise to you. A promise that for every meal you skipped so I could eat, I'm going to make sure you have the finest dining experiences. For every night you worked late so I could play basketball, I'm going to make sure you have peaceful, comfortable nights for the rest of your life. The video took an unexpected turn, as Shaq addressed the camera directly, speaking to his global audience. To everyone watching this, if you have parents who sacrificed for you, don't wait to show them appreciation. Don't assume they know how much their sacrifices meant. My mama's interview reminded me that behind every success story is someone who believed in you. Before you believed in yourself. He sat back down, his expression growing more serious. The world sees me as this big, successful guy who's always joking around. But what they don't see is that every joke, every smile, every moment of joy I share comes from the security of knowing I was loved unconditionally. My mama didn't just raise a basketball player. She raised a man who understands that real wealth isn't in your bank account. It's in the relationships you build, and the love you give and receive. The video concluded with Shaq looking directly into the camera one final time. Mama, you said in your interview that you wondered if you were doing enough. Let me answer that question for you and for every parent watching. You did more than enough. You did everything. You gave me the greatest gift anyone can give. You made me believe in myself by showing me what unconditional love looks like. As the video ended, viewers were left with a final image of Shaq holding a photo of him and his mother from his championship days, both of them smiling, both of them finally able to enjoy the fruits of their shared journey. Within 24 hours, the video had been viewed over 50 million times, shared by celebrities, athletes, and ordinary people who saw in Shaq's response a reflection of their own relationships with the people who had sacrificed for their dreams. Comments poured in from around the world, with people sharing their own stories of parental sacrifice and expressing how the exchange between Lucille and Shaq had inspired them to reach out to their own family members. The story of Lucille O'Neal's sacrifices and her son's heartfelt response became more than just viral content. It became a cultural moment that reminded millions of people about the power of gratitude, the importance of family, and the beautiful cycle of love that connects generations. In the end, what melted millions of hearts wasn't just Shaq's fame or success, but his ability to see beyond his own achievements to honor the woman who made them all possible. It was a reminder that no matter how big you become in the world's eyes, there's always someone who saw your potential when you were small, someone who believed in your dreams before they became reality, and someone whose love remained constant through every triumph and every struggle. The interview and response video became a testament to the truth that behind every extraordinary person is often an ordinary parent doing extraordinary things out of love, and sometimes, if we're lucky, the world gets to witness the moment when that love comes full circle.